Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first video in our weekly video series. This week we're going to talk about the 8 parts of speech. My name is Tim Goss and I will be leading you through these videos every week, and hopefully these will be very helpful in helping you to master the English language, especially the written part of English language. So let's go ahead and move on. We'll start talking about what we like to call the 8 parts of speech. Now, at its core, and I'm just going to kind of read this, but at its core, language is a method by which we communicate. It's perhaps, as we say here, the most powerful and direct way to connect to another person. Now, obviously, we have speaking, we also have body language and those type of things. What we miss in written language is those physical elements. We don't have the option of showing our disdain or showing our happiness or whatever within our writing as far as in the way that you can do when you're speaking live. So there's a very big difference here. Understanding the elements that go into this into written language is really important. So language, as we're saying, language, whether spoken, sung, or written, even beyond just the writing thing, it carries with it a thought, carries an idea, a request, an emotion, and so on. Because of this very active way of the way the language works, each word in the English language, each thing that we say has a meaning and a purpose. There's no wasted words. And this goes beyond definition of words. This goes into exactly how they're used. So this lecture, what we're going to talk about today, explores these 8 categories of words that we use to send and receive information. And we call these, as we've mentioned before, the 8 parts of speech. Understanding these various roles, understanding the various roles of words, will help you to better understand how to use them in effective and powerful ways. Let's move on and talk about each of these categories, if you will, as we move along. First off is nouns. You probably remember nouns, right? They're the easiest words to recognize. Nouns often are the subject or object of a sentence. We'll get into that a little more as we move along. And the definition, it's probably going to sound really, really familiar. You're going to remember this maybe from grade school or whatever. A noun is simply a word that expresses a person, a place, a thing, or an idea, right? They're very basic things. Some more recognizable nouns we have in our list here: a baby, head, cow, a fist pump, right? Air, onion, a baboon, city, phone, truck, monster, egg, and so on and so forth. There's going to be, pretty much anything, any word that represents an object or an idea or whatever is going to be what we consider a noun. Right? It's really important to understand that the noun is essentially the thing that is doing something in a sentence. Right? And we'll get into as far as like that a little bit more, but just understanding it is the thing that is either doing something, as I said before, or having something done to it. Right? Okay. So let's move on. Pronouns. Pronouns are like nouns, right? They can also serve as the object or the subject of a sentence. These words take the place of nouns, so we don't become repetitive in our writing. Okay, without pronouns, as we have in our example here, we might have a sentence like this: John was walking with John's wife and John's children around John's family's neighborhood. Right? That sounds like a terrible sentence, right? It's just it's really clunky. It doesn't flow. So we use pronouns to kind of shorten that, to make that a little easier to express. So, as we say here, pronouns can make the above sentence flow much more smoothly. In this case, John was walking with his wife and his children around their neighborhood. See how that makes sense? See how that flows together? Okay, so that's how pronouns work. Pronouns are very much like nouns, as we said before. They still express a person, place, thing, or idea, but they do it in relative fashion, right? They do it as far as standing in place of a noun. So let's move on. Adjectives. Adjectives are part of what we call a modifier class, right? It takes a noun or a pronoun and it takes a noun or a pronoun and basically, gives it a little more definition, if you will. So as we move on, we'll look at how that works. So adjectives, along with adverbs, and we'll get to that in a minute, they modify, as we said, as our textbook says, they add description to nouns or pronouns. It gives it, like we said just a moment ago, it gives it some definition. So let's look at how adjectives work. Right? So we have this sentence here in our example. The traveler stopped for a moment and looked up at the sky. Right? That's an okay sentence. There's nothing really wrong with that, right? But if we add some adjectives, we bring it a little more definition. We bring it a little more to life. So here we have the traveler, tired and cold, stopped for a moment and looked up at the glowing sky. All right. So in red here we have traveled, or we have the traveler. What is the traveler like? He or she was tired or cold. Right? So tired and cold, that's giving it kind of some more definition. We know a little bit more about the traveler. We know what the traveler was like. And what was the sky like? Well, the sky in this sentence was glowing, right? So it gives it a little more definition. It tells us a little bit more about what is going on with this traveler and what's going on in this scene that we're painting with words. Right, so that's how adjectives work. Understanding that adjectives are those things that modify either a noun or a pronoun, right? A noun or pronoun being the thing that's either doing something or having something done to it in a sentence, right? Is modifying that. It's making it a little richer, a little deeper, and giving us a little more definition. All right, so let's go on. Verbs. Verbs are probably the most important part of a sentence because in the English language, something is happening. As we say here, the English language is active. All sentences do something. The verb is the word type that describes the action of the sentence. It actually gives the sentence some action. All sentences, this is really, really, really important. You need to understand this. All sentences in the English language must both have a verb, as we're going to talk about here, and a subject, though some of these can be implied. But you need a verb and a subject. We've got, in our thing here, we've got the verbs in red, we've got the subjects in blue. We're going to kind of look at a couple of examples, right? So in our first sentence, Bob ran through the crowd, right? Okay, pretty simple sentence, right? We're kind of escaping. We're not really putting our adjectives in this thing. We've kind of taken those out. But here we have a verb, right? The action is ran. Bob ran through the crowd. What did Bob do? Bob ran, right? And then, of course, the subject, something performing the action, in this case, Bob, right? Bob is running through the crowd, or Bob, in this case, we're doing it in past tense. Bob ran through the crowd. Does that make sense? Right, so ran is going to be what he did. Another thing, the ice cream melted, right? So we have our noun, ice cream, right? And then what did the ice cream do? It melted. The ice cream melted. So melted being our verb in the sentence. Something is happening. Something is having something done to it, or something, or to that matter, right? So we could say the sun made the ice cream melt, right? So in that case, we would have the sun being the subject, right? The sun is doing something. What is it doing? Well, it's making the ice cream melt. So it's made melt would actually be the verb. That's a little more confusing of a construction. Don't worry about that so much right at this point. Just understand that you need something in a sentence and then something happening in a sentence. The thing that happens is done through the verb construction. So make sure you have those in each of your sentences. As we move on, adverbs are modifiers just like adjectives, right? So these, however, instead of where an adjective will say what was the noun or the pronoun like, right? Let's give that description. Now we're going to say what is the verb like? How, to what degree is this verb happening, right? Does that make sense? It's a little bit confusing, but hopefully our example helps to bring that out. So one thing to remember with adverbs is most of them end in ly, not all of them. So don't get too confused with that. But generally, if you see a word ending with an ly, it means it's an adverb, right? So in our example, mercilessly, she spun me around on her shoulders, carelessly and quickly, tossing me through the air, and I flew helplessly, not knowing if I cared about falling. Right? Kind of a neat sentence, right? So in here, we could just say, she spun me around on her shoulders and tossed me through the air, and I flew not knowing if I cared about falling, right? That's a pretty decent sentence. But when we add those adverbs, we get that how did she spin me around? Well, she did it mercilessly, right? She didn't really think about my feelings or how I felt. She just kind of tossed me in the air, right? And then, sorry, got a little distracted there. But anyway, so then carelessly and quickly she tossed me through the air. She didn't just toss me through the air. She did it without mercy. She did it carelessly, and she did it quickly. She didn't wait. She didn't waste any time, right? And I flew helplessly. I had no control over this, right? How did I fly? I flew helplessly, not knowing if I cared about falling, right? Does that make sense? See how the adverbs really add some meat to that? Okay, that's how adverbs work. Okay. Now there's other things as well, right? So we can say, how are you, Hope, right? Hope being the person that we're asking the question to. How are you is what we're asking, right? And then Hope responds, I am well, right? She could say, I am good, but good is not really an adverb. But you could say, I am well, right? That's what Hope would say. Well being the adverb in here. How is Hope? How is she feeling today? Well, she's feeling well, right? Okay, so, and then the other one, the last one in our little list here is you write beautifully. How do you write? You write being the verb. How do you do that? How do you do that? You write beautifully, right? You're very eloquent, if we want to use another big word, right? You're very eloquent in your writing. You write beautifully, right? See how that works? Okay, so let's move on. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so prepositions. Prepositions is the easy way to think about a preposition is to think about is a word of position. It shows where something is, right? So it's or a word of direction. It shows where something is, what something is where something is located, that type of thing. So here's our example in this. On the rooftop, on being the preposition, on the rooftop, there used to be a chair leaning. Where was the chair leaning? Against the steeple. A chair leaning against the steeple. During the storm last night, right? During the storm, not during being the preposition, right? It fell down and went through. Where did it go? It went through the top of Bertie's convertible while she was still, where was she? Inside the car. That's where her position was. Inside the car. She was so scared that she drove to, where did she drive? She drove to the pastor's house. And when did she do it? In the middle of the night, right? To insist he pray for her. What is he going to do? Where is he going to pray? He's going to pray for her, right? He didn't let her in. What did he not do? He didn't let her in, right? So on the rooftop there used to be a chair leaning against the steeple. During the storm last night it fell and went through the top of Bertie's convertible while she was still inside the car. She was so scared she drove to the pastor's house in the middle of the night to insist he pray for her. He didn't let her in. See how the prepositions work in that sentence? We've got the verbs going on. We've got the nouns going on. We've got pronouns involved in this. We've got a whole bunch of these words working together to present this meaning, to tell this story, to basically express what is going on, right? Prepositions are a big part of that. So as you go through, we'll look at prepositions. We'll also look at prepositional phrases through the book as far as how those work as well. Don't worry about that so much now, but just think about how prepositions work. Let's go on to the next one. Conjunctions. Conjunctions are actually they're words that join other clauses or other parts of sentences or whatever together, right? And there's three different types. We have coordinate conjunctions, right? These conjunctions coordinate sentences. We've got correlative conjunctions, right? And correlative conjunctions work in pairs together to express meaning, and then subordinating conjunctions, and we'll get into those as we go through. But subordinating conjunctions basically is a word that kind of makes the rest of that part of the sentence need the other part of the sentence. We'll get into that as we go on. But anyway, so our first one right here, we're going to talk about coordinating conjunctions. And there's only 7 of these. There's only 7. So think about it. There's a really interesting maybe mnemonic device, if you want to use kind of a big word for it, but a sound device. And if you kind of sing it to yourself, you say, and or but for, yet so nor. And or but for, yet so nor. And or but for, yet so nor. Those are your coordinating conjunctions. And so it kind of works like this. I love you. Perfect. That's a great sentence, right? I'm going to have to leave you at the shelter. That's a perfectly good sentence. But we can combine them together with the word but. So I love you, but I'm going to have to leave you at the shelter. See how that works together? How those fit? And as you go through this, as you really look at how these sentences are constructed, and we'll get into all this stuff throughout the rest of the class. But notice that we have a comma after the I love you part, right? So this is basically, we've got two complete sentences. We're joining them with a coordinating conjunction, and then right before the coordinating conjunction we have a comma, right? So like I said, these could be two complete sentences on their own, but we're adding that coordinating conjunction and the comma to make it a single sentence carrying basically a single idea, right? The extent of which that you love this thing. I mean, we're going to leave it at the shelter, so I'm going to go ahead and say this is an animal, but it could be a person, I guess, in this sentence. But I love you, but I'm going to have to leave you at the shelter. Let's move on. Okay, correlative conjunctions is really interesting to think at their core, they're relative. We need two parts for a correlative conjunction, right? You don't necessarily need to know the definition of these, but just know how they function in the sentence, right? But a correlative conjunction can't exist without a buddy nearby, right? And there's only 4 correlative pairs, right? There's only 4 that you don't need to worry about. And that's both and, right? Either or you can say either or. Neither nor or neither nor, however you want to pronounce those words, or not only and also. All right, so in our example here we say neither the car in the driveway nor the truck in the garage have been washed lately, right? Neither nor. Okay, we could say we could change it. We could say, well, it'd be kind of a weird sentence, but we could say either the car in the driveway or the truck in the garage have been washed lately, but we want the negative part of that, so we want to say that they haven't been washed. We could change it, I guess, to say either the car in the driveway or the truck in the garage need to be washed, right? We need to do one or the other, right? So so that's kind of how correlative conjunctions work. Our third category is subordinating conjunctions, and these are used at the beginning of a sentence, beginning of in what we call actually the beginning of a dependent clause, and we'll get into those as we go along. But you could also call that a subordinate clause, right? There are plenty of these conjunctions. You can find a list of them on page 69 of your textbook. We'll just give you kind of a quick example. Whichever way I need to go, just point the way. Right? So if we look at this, we could say just point the way would be a sentence in and of itself. By itself, that's what we would actually call an independent clause. Just point the way. It could be a perfectly good sentence. Whichever way I need to go, however, is not a complete sentence, right? Whichever way I need to go kind of it kind of ruins that part. So for this, we have the subordinating conjunction at the beginning. It's a great way to construct your sentences, but you just need to know kind of where that works, right? So whichever being that subordinating conjunction. Don't think you have to know this all right away, but these are things that you'll get to practice and get to work with as we move forward. Let's go to the next one. Okay, our next one is interjections. Now, interjections are fun. These are fun words. They express surprise or strong emotion. If you're using any kind of curse word, actually, that's going to be an interjection, right? We're not going to talk about curse words so much in this class. However, just know that those would be interjections, right? They're things that we throw in the middle that we don't really need, but they express surprise or strong emotion. They're really great things for putting exclamation points in. So, however, in academic writing, in standard written English, if you will, the things that you'll be using in college, you really want to pare these down. They're great if you're writing a narrative essay, which we'll talk about more as we go along, and you want to put that in dialogue. However, they don't tend to be very good within just a regular essay. So our examples here. Wow, what a great movie, right? It's not just what a great movie, but wow, what a great movie. Gives it that interjection, gives it that power, that emotion, that strong sense of surprise, right? Our next one, we're walking down the alley when, bam, the dumpster exploded, right? We could just say we're walking down the alley when the dumpster exploded, but with that bam, it kind of gives it that meat. It gives it that extra excitement within there, right? And then, of course, our last one, oops, sorry about that. You could just say sorry about that, but the oops kind of gives it a little more oomph. Gives a little more oomph. So interjections, I guess, in a really simple way, you can say it gives oomph to your sentences. That's a really great way to put it. So let's go ahead and move on. Okay, And so we've gone over the 8 parts of speech. We've gone over nouns. We've gone over pronouns, right? We've gone over adjectives, right? So the noun or the pronoun being the subject or the object of the sentence, the thing that is having something done to it, or the thing that is doing something in the sentence. The noun, that's pretty much the noun. And the pronoun, of course, stands in the place of the noun, right? It's the he, the she, the it, the her, those type of words that stand in, that make our sentences flow a little better, that make them not so clunky, if you will, right? We have the adjectives, right? The adjectives are going to describe the noun or the pronoun. They're going to give it a little more meaning. They're going to help define what that's all about. She was beautiful, right? What was she like? She was beautiful, right? That's our adjective, right? Then we've got our verbs. Our verbs are performing the action in the sentence. We had Bob ran. What did Bob do? Well, Bob ran. Well, it wouldn't be a really good sentence if we just said Bob. I mean, that's a really nice way to address Bob, right? But Bob, if we just say Bob, we don't know anything about Bob. If we said beautiful Bob, right? We know Bob's beautiful, but what is Bob doing? Why do we care what Bob's doing? So we give it that verb, that action word, right? Beautiful Bob ran, right? And then we have the adverb, which we move into, it helps describe that action a little bit further, helps us give it a little more meat, right? So beautiful Bob ran swiftly, right? We've got beautiful Bob, and what is Bob doing? Well, he's running. Well, how is he running? Bob is running swiftly, right? So now we have that adverb, right? And then we move on, and we've got our conjunction. Beautiful Bob ran swiftly and exited the building, right? So now we've got a coordinating conjunction in the middle of that. Beautiful Bob ran swiftly. Great, and he and exited the building, right? So then we've got that bringing all that together, right? So we've got all that, and then we've got our preposition, right? We've got beautiful Bob exited the building to the left, right? To being that he exited the building. Where did he exit the building? Well, to the left. Right, so we've got a preposition. We've got a place in time. We've got a place in geographical space, to use kind of a big term, where beautiful Bob ran. Now we've got beautiful Bob ran. Beautiful Bob ran swiftly and exited the building to the left when bam, the dumpster exploded. Just to kind of have that in there. So now we have our interjection giving us that oomph to the sentence. And this is how the 8 parts of speech work. These are how words go together to express meaning. This is how we express ourselves, our ideas, the things that are in our head, the things that we experience, how we share them with others, and this is how language works and the purpose of language, right? So understanding these 8 parts of speech and the roles that they play will help you as we move on and we talk about how to use grammar, right? How words work together. It'll help you in terms of your punctuation, how do commas work, how do quotation marks work, how do exclamation points work, semicolons, all these things that we're going to look at in this class that actually, and I know that maybe it sounds boring, but maybe these things are you'll find some excitement in these because the more you know about them, the better you're able to share yourself with the world, and the better you're able to tap into the things that are being shared in the world and understand them. So that's essentially what we're talking about, and as my phone goes off, so that's essentially what we're talking about. But anyway, yeah, I hope you'd enjoyed this, and we will talk next week. Bye.